Beautiful. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Ralph Ellis, I don't know if you all know me. Thanks for the introduction there, Hugh. Yes, this is my talk today, Eastern Megaliths and Microliths, because we're going to do a tour of Syria and the Levant, and we're going to look at the megaliths there, and we're going to finish off with a few of the microliths as well, because I think they come from the same era and the same provenance as the megaliths. Just get my notes out here. So, Eastern Megaliths and Microliths by myself, Ralph Ellis. This comes from my King Jesus trilogy, which is all from this region, of course. It started with Cleopatra to Christ, which traces the ancestry of Jesus. And we moved on, big 600-page opus, this one, King Jesus, and that gives us real historical events from the biblical stories. And that moved on to this one, Jesus, King of Edessa. This is quite pivotal, this book. This identifies the biblical Jesus in the historical record. So he was a real person, a real king, a king of Edessa. And we're going to look at Edessa later on, because it has some megaliths right next door to it. So, yeah, interesting book that, again, 600 pages identifying Jesus in the historical record. But while I was doing this, I kept coming across little snippets of Arthurian legend, because, I mean, who was the big hero of Arthurian legend? It was Joseph of Arimathea, who came from, obviously, this region. So the final book in this series, yeah, it's a trilogy in 4 parts, I know, but never mind. The Grail Cipher, which rewrites all of Arthurian history in a very different fashion. This is a Marmite book. You either hate it or you love it, one of the two. Nothing in between. Anyway, so let's move on. Let's have a look at some megaliths. So, not sure if you recognise this. This is obviously a megalith, and this comes from the Temple of Jerusalem. So yes, the Jerusalem temple is built on a foundation that is megalithic. And you can see from this picture, here's the megaliths down below. Here is the more recent architecture, the Roman architecture up above. So we have 2 distinct eras here. And if you look at that megalith, does that sort of look familiar to you? Anyone that's been out to Egypt? Well, to me, it looks rather like this one. Where's that? We're back at Giza here. So have a look at these megaliths. Obviously, the second pyramid is actually based on an artificial platform, and it happens to be made of megaliths that look extremely like the ones that underpin the Jerusalem temple. So are we talking here the same era, the same designer? I think so, because we can find this all over the Near East. So that's Giza. Let's jump back to Jerusalem. And this is another megalith up in Jerusalem. This is underpinning the Jerusalem temple there, the Temple of Solomon. Now have a look at this particular megalith. I have an inkling that these holes are often used for actually lifting the stones into position. So have a look at this megalith and compare it with the next one. Okay, similar. Where are we now? We're up at Baalbek. If you know Baalbek, it's up in Lebanon, just to sort of the west of Damascus. This is the Baalbek temple, which was probably the largest temple complex in the Roman Empire. And as you can see, it is founded upon megaliths. And then we have the more recent architecture up above. So, yeah, we have a series of megaliths that all look the same in this particular region. So let's have a look at Baalbek then, because it's an interesting site. This is underneath the Baalbek temple. So now we can see that we have two eras here. There are two distinct eras. We have, so this tunnel is underneath Baalbek, the Baalbek temple platform. And we have here megaliths underneath, and we have Roman architecture up above. Now, we're not exactly sure why the Romans had to rebuild this. Obviously, the roof structure would have been megalithic. It would have been lintels across the top. Perhaps it eroded away, perhaps it was damaged by earthquakes, who knows. But we don't know when it was damaged and why the Romans had to rebuild it. But they did, and they put a standard Roman arch on the top. So we have two distinct eras. And the question then becomes, of course, when was the megalithic era? It's obviously pre-Roman, but when was that megalithic era? Well, you've probably seen people try to decide this by archaeoastronomy or things of that nature, but there's another way we can look at this, and that is by erosion. So if we can assume a standard rate of erosion on stones, we can have two different erosion rates, and we can maybe get a date from that. So here's a bit of erosion. You will see, this is back at Giza again. This is from the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is the, oh, it's all a bit white here. I don't mind. This is the pavement upon which the Great Pyramid rests. So we have two blocks of stone. We have a block of stone here, and we have a block of stone here, and we have this line running down the middle. Why is there a line there? Well, because originally the casing blocks came down here. So what we have then is we have this area was protected by the casing blocks, and this area was always being weathered by the sun, by the rain, by the feet of pilgrims, and it was being worn away over the millennia. And then someone came along during the Muslim era, and they took away the casing blocks. They were all used for building projects down in Cairo. And so now, both sides of this stone were exposed to the elements. And so here we see there is less erosion because that has only been exposed for 1,000 years. We know when these casing blocks were taken away. But this area has been exposed ever since the pyramid was built. The interesting thing is between here and here, this area on the left has 10 times as much erosion as the area on the right. So, if this has been exposed for 1,000 years, then we can probably say, if we can assume a standard erosion rate, that this area here has been exposed for 10,000 years. So as a rough guide, we can probably say that the Great Pyramid is about 10,000 years old. And therefore the megalithic era is probably about 10,000 years old. So it's rough and ready, but it's a good guide to how far back we're looking for the megalithic era. So that is an estimate of the megalithic era. Let's go back to Baalbek then, where we were before. This is up in Lebanon. And have a look at some of the architecture that's been built there. So this is the small temple at Baalbek. Actually, it's not that small really, but anyway, we'll see in a minute. It's a vast temple. This is the temple of Aphrodite. It goes under several names, this particular temple. But it's almost in as new condition, a little bit TLC, and they could put this back into its original condition. But I say this is the